Hi everyone! I've gotten a few new followers recently here and on TikTok and Instagram, and so I wanted to do just kind of a general video about my philosophy here at Whole Body Healing with Jen. Because when I get new followers, I tend to get a lot of the same questions. A lot of times, people who stumble on my page are people who have dealt with a lot of really confusing, ambiguous, but debilitating symptoms for a long time. They maybe have tried a lot of things, they've gone to a lot of doctors, they've gone to a lot of specialists, they've done a lot of alternative care already, and they are still struggling. Or maybe they're new on the scene of dealing with a chronic illness, dealing with an autoimmune disease, dealing with a neurological issue, and they're just confused. It just all seems so overwhelming. They can't get clear answers or clear information. And so some of the questions I tend to get are, how do I get a diagnosis? What kind of specialist do I need to see? And how do I figure out my root cause? And so I wanted to answer all of these in one video that kind of explains the perspective that I come from when I'm working with someone. So, first of all, we have to think about what diagnoses are. Diagnoses are really just clusters of symptoms that doctors have tended to see come together. That's it. There's nothing magical about a diagnostic criteria. It doesn't give you any information about how it developed, why it developed, or what to do to reverse it. It's literally just, these are the things we observe that tend to come together and tends to progress in this way. Here, let's put a name to it, right? In some ways, it's actually very unscientific. And it's really focused on what is wrong, right? What is malfunctioning in the body, what is, basically like what is not working, what is not happening right, so to speak, right? And that causes this set of symptoms. And so, of course, the solution to a diagnosis is here, let's figure out a way to fix that problem, right? To make that mechanism not happen anymore. So we basically block the symptoms from happening because now this mechanism that is causing the symptoms is not happening anymore. That is actually not healing, right? Because the mechanistic thing that is wrong, right, that gives way to the set of symptoms that are the diagnostic criteria, that is the absolute surface level of what is happening, right? So it doesn't give anything about the deeper underlying causes of why this surface mechanism is happening what looks like wrong on the surface, because the reality is every symptom has a function. Every mechanistic process or metabolic process that looks like it's malfunctioning, there's a reason it's malfunctioning, so to speak, in the way that it is. And getting a diagnosis or figuring out like this mechanism is happening weird, that doesn't give us the information that you actually need to heal and reverse the issue. So this is another reason why specialists, in my opinion, are usually not worth the time and money to get to. Now, obviously that's a very generalized statement. There are specialists out there that do really wonderful work, and even though they've ended up in a niche, pocket of the medical field, they work from a more holistic or systemic perspective. But in my experience, that is extremely rare. And most specialists are very targeted into like what body system are you having a symptom in, and what mechanism is broken, and how can we fix it through medication. Again, not actually helpful in healing or reversing. That is only helpful in suppressing symptoms, and sometimes they're not even that good at doing that. I get clients all the time that have been to multiple specialists and still haven't found relief from their symptoms. The reality is the body is a complex, interrelated system, right? And so most people who experience chronic illness are having symptoms all over their body, right? Because there's deeper underlying things that are happening that are causing systemic inflammation. Systemic inflammation means that you're going to have symptoms in multiple body systems, right? So you're going to need a 10 specialist for all the different, to cover all the different symptoms that you're experiencing. And each of those specialists is going to be focused in on one body system and one set of symptoms, and like you're missing the entire point. You're missing the entire picture. We are an ecosystem, and we respond as an ecosystem with systemic shifts, right? If one species goes extinct in a forest, it's not just like, oh, now that species is gone, right? There's a snowball effect of all sorts of other systems that then have to shift to fill in that place, right? And our bodies work the same way. We are an ecosystem, and we are embedded in an ecosystem, and we respond to the ecosystem around us and adjust what's happening inside of us depending on what's going on outside of us. So, complex system. That's how to think about the body, and all chronic illness is happening in that context. So, to answer the question, how do I get a diagnosis? I mean, you can go and describe your symptoms to a doctor and you might get a diagnosis, but it's not really going to do much for you. Honestly, the only time I find that a diagnosis is really important is if someone just has a personality or a mentality where like they need to have a name to like quell their anxiety, but it's not going to change how you address it from a deeper root cause, holistic perspective. And specialists are generally just going to suggest medications or surgeries. Again, they're not going to get at the deeper root, generally speaking. So, and obviously I do have a biased clientele because often they've gone to see specialists before they come to see me and they've had bad experiences, but I have a lot of clients that have spent a lot of time and money and energy going to specialists and don't get the answers they're looking for, and then end up coming to me or someone who works similarly to me. So, when there are threats or stressors in the environment, when there's something that is damaging us, damaging our tissues, our cells, on a really deep level, the body is going to respond, right? And it's going to respond with its defense mechanisms. It's going to respond by creating inflammation, by trying to get us in a state where we can either heal or survive. And we get enough of these assaults, enough of these stressors, and the body's going to say, look, like, we got to put healing on hold. We just got to keep you alive for a while, until we get into a different environment. So, the body is a system, right? The body is an ecosystem, and it gets into these interconnected looping patterns. That's really a better way to look at clusters of symptoms, is like one little piece on a wheel that is interconnected with a bunch of other wheels, and they're all moving and interacting with each other, right? It's a lot more complex to think of it that way, but it's more realistic. Now, positive feedback is going to keep these interconnected looping patterns the same, or continue progressing in that same way. It's a little bit weird, the vocabulary, because positive feedback basically means more of the same in this way of thinking about it. Whereas negative feedback shifts the cycle. Negative feedback creates a shift or a change in these complex interconnected looping patterns. Something kind of shifts, and then because of that, all the other mechanisms around it start shifting, right? So when we are trying to reverse complex chronic diseases, we need to introduce negative feedback into the system. And a lot of times that is not going to the same type of conventional doctors that you have been seeing since you were a little kid, probably, right? Going to a pediatrician and all that, because that has been the feedback that the system has been getting all along. It has just continued to exacerbate these same patterns in the body. We need to bring in new stimuli. We need to change your environment. We need to get your ecosystem stimulated in a different way. That is going to create the negative feedback to start actually shifting the whole system and get you out of this perpetual state of inflammation. Now, in terms of root cause, this is more of a conversation worth having, in my opinion, because when we're talking about root cause, we're not looking at the surface symptoms anymore, right? We're saying, okay, here are these underlying stressors, right? These underlying issues that can then cause this systemic inflammation and create all these different types of symptoms in the body. So I talk about root cause a lot, right? When I first meet with a client, I'm always like, all right, we're going to do a detailed health history so we can really figure out what the root cause of your symptoms are. But people get really caught up in having an answer on a piece of paper that has been printed out by a laboratory saying, here it is, right? And I have spent a lot of money on tests in my life. When I was trying to figure out what's going on with me, I've spent thousands and thousands of dollars on testing and getting those pieces of paper. And honestly, it didn't really change the course of my healing very much. I probably would have stumbled on the same practices and the same things whether or not I had that piece of paper. So if I could go back, I probably would have just done the things that I know now that really generally get people healthy. Again, if you are that personality type where you really need to see that piece of paper and you have money to burn, you can go to a naturopath and you can get a GI map. You can get a SpectraCell, cellular nutrient test, which is really the only type of nutrient deficiency test that I recommend. Blood tests really don't tell that much. You could get, a hair trace mineral analysis to see if you have heavy metal toxicity. You can do all these things, right? If you want to spend the money, you have the time, you have the energy, you want to see that piece of paper, go for it, right? But in my experience, people have many root causes. There's usually not just one thing. There may be kind of an event that pushes someone over the edge, right? Where they kind of identify okay, this is when I got sick. But usually it's a slow accumulation over time of many things. And so I don't do testing with my clients, right? I will look at tests if you have them and give my opinion on them, but I am probably going to recommend very similar things to you no matter what your tests say, because I'm looking at your symptoms and I'm saying, okay, I know from your history you've potentially had these stressors, right? And I know the things to look for that indicate this is probably an underlying stressor. And most of those stressors, again, are addressed similar ways. This is why I have mixed feelings about all the videos I do about different conditions and stuff like that, because I repeat myself a lot, right? If you have an imbalanced microbiome, if you have a congested liver, if you have a very dysregulated nervous system, if you have a diet that is low in nutrients, you will probably have parasitic infections, heavy metal toxicity, pesticide toxicity, all of these kinds of root causes. We don't really have to test to make an educated guess that these are things going on for you. And regardless of whether they've had testing done or not, I see results in my clients when they start changing the inputs of their environment, right? So whether you have a parasitic infection or lead toxicity or a severe vitamin deficiency, we need to get your gut healed. We need to support your liver. We need to regulate your nervous system. We need to get you eating a nutrient-dense diet, because those kinds of things are going to address all of those potential root causes together simultaneously. So this is similar, people will come to me and they made an appointment because they want to work on their POTS, but then during the session they're like, oh, but I also have EDS, can we work on that too? And it's the same things are going to work on that, right? The key is to not get caught in the details. The key is not to get caught in the labels. The key is not to get caught what it says on that piece of paper from the lab. The key is to think about your body as this complex system that is stuck in these looping patterns, and we need to bring negative feedback in to shift those patterns and get the body working in a different way so that it feels able to just heal, so that it feels able to just repair, to just detoxify in all the ways it is built to do. So it's about being in our bodies differently. It's about being in our environments differently. It's about completely restructuring how you are in the world day to day, what you eat, what you expose yourself to, what you do. These are the things that no matter what your root cause, no matter what your diagnosis, no matter what specialists you've seen or haven't seen, will get you results. So that is why my book, which is coming out Monday, gives you 6 support protocols, because these are the 6 areas of life I have identified that I see people get the most results in if they really change the way they are in those areas of life. So the first one is kind of an introductory one. It's just called Befriend, and it's just to get you interacting with your own body and your own symptoms differently. Right? Because a lot of times people get stuck in these loops of anxiety around their symptoms, and they just dig themselves into a hole where they are in too much of a dysregulated nervous system state to get benefit from any of the healing practices that they're doing. But then we get into really concrete stuff. We get into nutrition, we get into sleep, we get into detoxification, we get into movement, and then we get into mindset, the thought patterns that you have, the way your nervous system is regulated or dysregulated, and implementing those things. Again, no matter what is going on for you, your body will start to heal. So this is a full rebuilding of yourself. It is a huge undertaking, but it is what we need collectively as a society, because chronic disease is epidemic right now, and it's because we are stuck in these feedback loops in our environments, in our bodies, and we need to have a really big change. So I'm going to be posting my Amazon link for my book launch on Monday. Stay tuned, and thank you so much for listening and tuning in.